Good morning, folks. I'm just heading over to Heathcote. Got to go to the doctor. Also got to pop into the Shire office, which reminded me the memorial to Willie Aitken is outside the Shire office. It's what I consider one of the best Boer War monuments in Victoria, and actually it started this series when I bought the Osmo. One of the first episodes I did was going over to Heathcote to see the memorial to Willie Aitken. I really like it because it gives us his regiment, Thorneycrofts, the mounted infantry, the South African Light Horse. It tells us where he died at the Battle of Colenso, the date, 15th of December 1899, and it gives us a lovely sort of poem or some old Victorian sappy melancholy words to remember dying as a soldier. So I really like it. It's in good condition, so we might have a look at that again, and I'll talk a bit more about Willie because I didn't know a lot about him, surprisingly, but bits and pieces have been coming through as I've researched more in the last couple of days. But Willie was the first Australian soldier to die in the Boer War. I knew that, but I didn't know much more about him, so I'll talk a bit about that in this episode. On the weekend I'm going to Bendigo to got a couple of ideas of some things I want to see in Bendigo, and I'll talk then about how I organised that trip. If you're a battlefield enthusiast, I'll talk a bit about how I organised my holiday, but today I'd like to talk about why I went to South Africa in just over a year ago now. Time's going pretty fast, but just over a year ago I came back. So actually I wanted to go to South Africa in the year 2021. It was to be 50 years after we left to go to live in South Africa, so we left in 1971. So I wanted to do the old 50-year recreation. My idea was, and I'd been planning it sort of about, I'm going to say about 2 or 3 years before 2021 came up. I had started thinking I've got to go back. I hadn't been back to South Africa since maybe 1990, but it was probably the 80s, I think. So I hadn't been back for that long, and I was in a settled, stable relationship. I was able to save a bit of money, and one of the things with my partner is he's very good with money, and he had a financial advisor that I talked to, and I had a lot of super that I'd worked in a lot of contract positions in IT, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year, sometimes a couple of weeks even, and all that money in Australia we pay super. It was all over the place. So this financial advisor went and found all my super for me, and he put it in one big lump sum, and I was surprised how much money I had. So that's how I came to be able to afford the whole thing. So what I wanted to do was go across to South Africa, land in Durban as we had done, and then take the train from Durban to Pretoria like we'd done, Mum and Dad, my brother and myself. But of course I wasn't going to take a ship over like we had done. I was going to fly to Johannesburg and then just change planes in Johannesburg, fly directly down to Durban, and then start my holiday there, recreate that train trip we took, which was an overnighter up to Pretoria. And as I started exploring and scratching around this, in the very early days, but I was lucky because I've got my friend Brian Gould that lives in, he lives just outside Johannesburg. He lives in Benoni. So I went to school with him. So I was able to talk to him and ask him questions. So the first thing I found out was there was no more train system. There's limited trains with cargo or freight, but there's no passenger service per se, especially from Durban to Pretoria. The train lines are no longer used for passengers, so that wasn't going to be possible. And then COVID came along, and that blew out that 50-year time frame. I had to wait for COVID to pass, but that was okay. And I got there when I got there. So yeah, that's kind of why I chose to go at that time. Now, I'd been to South Africa other times, but I never knew you could visit battlefields, or I never looked into it. I had around about the year 2000, I strongly wanted or considered going to South Africa to go to the centenary of the Battle of Spienkop. But it was only ever half-hearted and sort of flippantly. I was working in the council and I had an IT sort of contract going on. And I thought about it, but it was too much work and I just didn't think it was really possible. I thought these places were overgrown, forgotten about and unvisited, but that's nothing could be further from the truth. The battlefields of South Africa are very well documented, very well signposted in most cases. So the Battle of Colenso for today, yeah, and I'll be putting in a few snippets here and there of my time or my day when we went to Colenso with my tour guide Liz. I think we probably spent an hour or an hour and a half at Colenso. There was a few other things we did on the same day. The place where the train was derailed and Churchill was captured was on that day. We also went to the grave of Freddie Roberts, the VC, the posthumous award of the VC to Freddie, the only son of Field Marshal Roberts. We went to his grave, and yeah, we did find the grave of Willie Aitken that we're going to see today, the monument. We found his grave. I did put up a picture. The local, they call it the Heathcote Town Crier. It's a Facebook group that has the goings on of the town of Heathcote, which is central Victoria. It's beautiful, you know, surrounded by nice hills, cliffs. I did put up a picture of Willie's grave for the locals, but I only one person commented "wow," but I got no other interest really from it. So I haven't been able to find out where Willie lived. I know that he was a saddler, and I know that when he was about 24, he followed his brother to Johannesburg for the gold rush. So he was in South Africa when the war broke out. That's how he joined Thorneycrofts Mounted Infantry. Now that unit had been formed sort of mid-November 1899. And they had done some skirmishing and they'd done some patrolling. They were about 500 strong. He came into his own at the Battle of Spienkop. But before that, we've got the Battle of Colenso. I think they saw some service in a week or two before Colenso at the Battle of Moy River. But yeah, today we're talking about Colenso. So I talked about, when I did this video about a year, 2 years ago, I talked about the loop where the Irishmen went into, the Irish brigades. They were trying to cross the Tugela River. They used to call Buller the ferryman of the Tugela because he was always trying to get his men across the river. So the Irish brigades were let out really early in the morning, like 4 a.m, and they were led by a guide who could barely speak English. And when they got down to the river, there was like a pontoon, I think, and some areas where they could cross. And it's a series of loops and horseshoes on the river. Now, I did get to see it from a distance, and I'll show you guys from a distance what it looks like, but their guide led them into, by mistake, he led them into this horseshoe, and the Boers were all in, they were dug in, they were in defensive positions, and they cut down the Irishmen as they were in the river and as they were trying to ascend and take the heights. They were decimated from three sides, enfilade fire from three sides of this horseshoe where the Boers were dug in. It was a tremendous artillery battle that day. Actually, Buller was slightly wounded in the artillery duel. So that's where we get to the far right of the action with the Irish brigades. We get Hildyard's and Thorneycrofts mounted infantry was sent to the far right to try and take a mountain called Llangwani, which we'll see as well. So one of the things I had down that I wanted to see was the place where Freddie Roberts was shot and killed trying to save the guns. There's real famous paintings of saving the guns at Colenso. Now, to the right of that is where the mounted infantry were trying to take this Llangwani mountain, and they were actually having some success, but Buller got cold feet. When the reports came back of the decimation of the Irish brigades, he called the battle off. So those guys had to retreat back, and that's where Willie was killed trying to take Llangwani. He was shot through the heart on that day. So, all right, I've got a car behind me. Got to keep motoring along, and we'll talk more when I get to the monument. So I've just dropped off the old batteries for recycling at the Shire Council, and they also take any e-waste. We found an old sort of modem that I got rid of. Anyway, this is the old courthouse. It's now a like a gift shop, but the women knit jumpers, they do crafts in there, and this is the Shire office. So this would have all been the courthouse precinct when Willie was here. It's pretty impressive, isn't it? I can't tell you exactly where the saddler was. I might find it one day, but I'm not going to find it today. I found the name of the saddler that he worked for, but it's not a name that I know. I've been in around this district just over 10 years. So there's a few names mentioned. We're going to... but anyway, here's the monument, right? It's fantastic. I even thought of getting a rubbing, like Dad used to do with his... put some greaseproof paper on there, and then you rub it with a like a crayon. Enough they murmur, oh my tomb, he like a soldier fell. It tells us all we need to know. Thorneycrofts, mounted infantry, Colenso, the 15th December 1899. So you can imagine when I saw that for the first time when I moved up here, and that word Colenso, that was one of the battles of Black Week. And on the other side is another Boer War veteran, Ankle Doohan. Costerfield's where they dig the gold up. Ankle Doohan, I think, is in Zimbabwe. Maybe it used to be South Africa, but I think he was part of the troops that were landed in Mozambique and marched inland towards Bulawayo to attack the Boers from the north. I think Ankle Doohan is now in Zimbabwe. So I'll read you a bit about sort of some of the letters that came back from South Africa describing Willie's death for his sister, I think it was. I'll also read you some of the the goings on of the day that this monument was dedicated. I think it used to be a drinking fountain. Can't see. Yeah, look, there's a few holes there. Maybe that held the trough for the drinking fountain. So the unveiling ceremony of the Aitken Memorial, the handsome memorial erected by public subscription to the memory of Private Willie Aitken of Thorneycrofts Mounted Infantry, a native of Heathcote, killed in action at the Battle of Colenso, was unveiled yesterday in the presence of a large concourse of people. The unveiling ceremony performed by the Reverend G.N. MacDonald, chaplain to the 5th Victorian Contingent. A small platform had been erected for the speakers on one side of the memorial, around which were grouped Mr. A. Aitken, father of Willie, Arthur Aitken, the brother, John Aitken, the uncle, and the following returned soldiers who went to the front from this district: Troopers J. Hayes, C. Howard, E. Donaldson, J. Richards, the 5th Victorian Contingent, T. Butler, the 4th Victorian Bushman Contingent, and T. Richards, the 2nd Commonwealth Horse. I did look around. I haven't been able to find any Aitkens still in the district, although there is Barfold, which is not far from here, and there is an Aitken that runs the Barfold Winery. So maybe there's a connection there. Anyway, back to the day in question. On the other side of the memorial were placed the Heathcote Brass Band, and then some cadets. There was some fire brigade in attendance, the general public being grouped around the outside, the whole forming a pleasing and imposing assemblage. Prior to the ceremony, the flag was hoisted half-mast at the Shire Hall by cadets drawn, and run up to the masthead when the memorial was unveiled. The proceedings were commenced by the band playing Sons of the Sea. They called on the Reverend MacDonald to perform the unveiling ceremony. Right, so the good Reverend said that he felt it a great honour to have been asked to perform the ceremony, and he supposed the honour was due to his connection with the military forces and also to his having been a member of the 5th Victorian Contingent. They were all familiar with the events of the late war, and they would now realise, as they may not have done before, that the war was undertaken for two great principles. Firstly, the upholding of British prestige in the eyes of the world. Secondly, the preservation of the British flag in South Africa. So I think this memorial was unveiled just after the war had finished. Back to the Reverend. The war had been undertaken for a righteous cause, and although the continental press was not at all friendly to Great Britain throughout the war, yet they were now. A chaplain and a doctor had opportunities of doing a lot of good and peaceful work in time of war. He was glad to bear testimony to the splendid and chivalrous treatment dealt out by the British troops to the men, women and children in the concentration camp. I don't think that would be agreed in this day and age, but that's what he reckons. He eulogised the work done by the Australian soldiers in the war and referred to the wonderful effort that the conduct of the British Navy had in maintaining peace. He understood the late Private Aitken was the first Australian soldier killed in the war, and it was only right that we should do honour to his memory. He left this town where he was well respected and where some of his respected relatives still reside, to try and better himself in South Africa. And while there, the war broke out in all its fury, and the deceased soldier enlisted in Thorneycrofts Mounted Infantry, which did splendid work throughout the war. The Reverend paid a high tribute to the work done by the irregular troops. They were doing honour that day to the memory of one of their late townsmen who was ready to fight and needs to die for his country. He exhorted the young people to always do their duty and pointed out to them that the hall of duty led to the path of glory. It had a melancholy pleasure in unveiling this beautiful memorial
and sympathised with the relatives of the deceased soldier. He thought, however, that it was a source of great satisfaction to them to see his memory so revered by the people of Heathcote as a soldier who had died for his country. The veil was then lifted off the memorial, and the cadets fired a volley, and the band played Soldiers of the King. The Boer River, the 26th of November, 1899. Dear Jack, just a line to let you know that I'm still in the land of the living. We are having a pretty hard time of it, but I'm thriving on it. I am a few pounds heavier than I was. We have had only 2 brushes with the Boers and only had about 5 wounded and none killed. The Boers lost a few men, 6 killed and 20 wounded in the first affair, which took place last Sunday. None of the regulars took any part in the fight of last Sunday, only the Thorneycrofts mounted infantry. It was not much of a battle. We were too far away from each other, about 1,600 yards. You cannot see whether you hit your man or not. A few days after that they started shelling our camp, but did nothing. Our artillery had a go at them. I do not know whether they did anything or not. By Jove, the shells do whistle through the air. We are leaving this camp today. I'm not sure whether we are going to Eastcourt or not, but I think we are. There are a lot of regulars here now. They're coming in every day. There must be about 4,000 men here now. The Boers left here yesterday. They tracked north. When you write to Siegel, tell him I'm going strong. Remember me to all the boys. Wish them all at home a Merry Christmas for me, and the same for yourself if I do not manage to write again. I remain your affectionate brother, Bill. All right, this is a map of the Battle of Colenso. Looks like it was done at the time. There's no doubt I could do it online somehow. If I got some software or some apps to do it, I could get moving stuff, but I can't figure that out. I don't have the time or the patience, so bear with me. We're going to do it manually, right? So, the Tugela River, the town of Colenso. Now, when we first got there, me and Liz, I reckon we went there. I reckon that Buller had his headquarters there and some guns, because he was injured slightly by return fire from artillery from the Boers.
There was originally a brass toposcope here which explained everything to you, but it's been stolen. But from here then on, from the 15th of December, Buller conducted the early part of the Battle of Colenso, and he was positioned on a hill on our left here. They had guns, and then in the hills opposite, which you see are very high, you had all the Boers were spread in these high hills.
Yeah.
All the way down to, there's some cooling towers. You see those?
Yeah, I do.
That is the town, little town or little village of Colenso.
It does say there's a Maxim there. These are all, and a Krupp. These are all the Boer positions. You got Boksburg Commandos, the Middelburg Commandos, the Krugersdorp Commandos. There's even Johannesburg Police there somewhere. So I think that when we first, and this is where they were buried. When Liz and I went, I think there's a cemetery there for some of the killed from the battle, and that's where we found Willie Aitken's grave down there, I reckon. We've come out to a military cemetery called Clouston, I think, and Liz did a bit of homework. We were looking for Willie Aitken. Oh wow, we found him straight up.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I reckon Buller had his position there that he was looking at over the battle. Now, these are where the Irish boys went in early morning, as I said, with the guide. They were led in sort of at 4:30 a.m. You got the Connaught Rangers and the Dublin Fusiliers, and they ended up in that horseshoe, and the Boers were entrenched all around them. What's it say? G, the Middelburg Commando. And then they were able, and those guys there as well, D, which is the Kruger and the Irish Brigade. Some of the Boers had Irishmen fighting for them. So they were able to enfilade into that horseshoe, and it cut the Irishmen down in swathes.
The Tugela runs where the trees are there round. Okay.
That ring of trees in front of that brown patch.
Okay, there's a brown patch. Then there's the trees like a U shape. See them?
Yeah.
And the green in the middle is the loop. Now the entrance to that loop, there was 2 drifts that he could have crossed to get across the river. Do you understand?
You see that loop?
But he went into the loop.
There's a loop there.
And the Boers had a gun on this hill here, see it? So they shot right into them.
Oh, yeah.
And they had barbed wire all around the river.
Okay, I get you.
So it was a hell of a mess. Now, next thing Liz and I, what I wanted to see was where the guns were lost. So you can see here, this is where Freddie Roberts was killed. H is where Freddie was killed. We're there, right? So we pulled in on the car, and we parked the car about there, and we walked just to where there used to be little plaques and mementos of where each of the guns were and the men that were lost there trying to defend the guns.
Side of the railway, overgrown and forgotten, is where the guns were lost at the Battle of Colenso. There's all these little white markers here. They look like they might have had names of probably the artillerymen that lost their lives trying to save the guns.
Freddie went forward to try to save the guns and lost his life. Okay, but what we're interested in, you got the South African horse, and that's it. Hlongani Mountain. Am I saying it right? Hlongani. I'll have to read it out properly. But see that? Thorneycroft. And because Liz knew that I was interested in Willie Aitken, she pointed over and she said that's Hlongani Mountain.
Been on top, and although they got up a little bit, they withdrew. And he was killed in action near this river, stream, Gombe Stream. They mention it.
Right.
That's where he was on his way there, and he was killed in action here, I suppose, from Boer fire.
From the heights.
Yeah.
Hlongwane.
So we got F, the Wackerstroom commandos were probably up on the heights of that, and they were firing down onto the mounted infantry as they tried to climb and to take those heights. And that's where Willie copped one in the chest, in the heart, and was killed instantly. And then Buller got cold feet. Remember, they were trying to cross the Tugela because up that way was Ladysmith. They were trying to relieve Ladysmith, right? But he got cold feet. They got hammered. They actually captured the town of Colenso. Oh, Liz and I also went through the town of Colenso. It's a dump now. There's not much there, but we did. We did go through the town of Colenso. And then so then Buller pulled his troop back and they retreated, and that was the Battle of Colenso, which was part of Black Week.
The Town Hall, Pietermaritzburg, Natal, December the 31st, 1899. Dear Mr. Aitken, Mr. Blair left here hurriedly on Friday night for the front to join a squadron of the Imperial Light Horse at Freer, and he asked me to open any wires or letters that came for him, as he was expecting a letter from you with the full address to send the photos your poor brother had taken just before he left for the front. He left one for Mrs. Dickett's, one for Mr. Blair, and one for me, so I am sending you the remaining 3, which we all think is a splendid likeness of him.
He was such a great favourite in camp and in fact with everybody, and we all feel deeply grieved at his death and greatly sympathise with you and your family at your sad loss. Mrs. Dickett asked me to tell you she has a diamond ring and some studs which your brother wished her to give to you if anything happened to him, and she wants to know if she will send them to your address in Cape Town, or is there any possibility of you coming up to Maritzburg so she could give them to you personally. Lieutenant Ponsby of the Thorneycrofts Mounted Infantry was carrying your poor brother in as he was only slightly wounded when a bullet shot him right through the heart, killing him instantaneously. It is terribly, and for you all, but he died a soldier's death, and his relations and friends must all feel proud of him. With kind regards from Mrs. Dickett and self, believe me, sincerely yours, Edith Sutton. Bennett Burley, the veteran war correspondent who has been all through the Sudan and other campaigns, said it was the most terrible fighting he'd ever witnessed. Just to show you how the Boers fight, one of the mounted infantry told us they were out last week at Estcourt 4 days fighting and twice under very heavy fire, and they never sighted a Boer, even once. Can you believe it? They seem to fight like rabbits. Oh, this is a terrible war. It is so cruel. Hundreds of wounded men have been brought down from the battle at Shively. Maritzburg is full of poor wounded and dying soldiers. They've turned every available building into hospitals and now are thinking of using the churches. We've lost terribly. In fact, up to date, the Boers have scored every time. They've kept every position and taken everything. Have just heard that poor Mr. Aitken, an Australian who was only down from Freer to see us the other day, on returning to the war, was shot through the heart and killed instantaneously. Mr. Loftus, a friend of young Fitzgerald, who was in the brewery at Johannesburg, hadn't seen his brother, who was captain of the Inniskillen Fusiliers for nearly 3 years, till the other day, when he saw him for a few minutes going to the front, and he's just called to tell me that his poor brother has been killed and was so cut up he could hardly speak. On the 17th he got a wire saying Mr. Lewis, a friend of poor Aitken's, and in the same tent, was coming down wounded, and we went to the station to meet him. 100 poor soldiers came down at the same time, and not one could walk alone. It was terrible to see them carried out on stretchers, and all so brave, not a murmur out of them. 5 died coming down, and 10 have died since. While we were there, we helped handing the wounded milk to drink and Bovril and all sorts of things. One poor fellow tried to drink, but the blood gushed out of his mouth and stopped him. Another poor fellow was shot dumb. Some of the poor fellows say they want to put a bullet in their brigade general who sent them unnecessarily to certain death. They say he will not be shot by the Boers. Poor Mr. Lewis was left on the field for dead and then found and carried 2 miles across a horse, and afterwards by 6 men on 3 rifles. He was shot across the back, the bullet just touching his spine, and we feel the poor fellow will be paralysed, but he is so plucky and cheerful and keeps the ward alive with his jokes. An artilleryman died in the next bed to him while we were there, and he was the only man who came away from the guns. 25 of Thorneycroft's men, Mr. Lewis among them, only were told off to take a copy. Only 5 came back. One poor soldier that died had a lot of money in his belt and a letter to his wife, and another open letter saying if he died to send everything he had to her. Other soldiers who have died since were minus their jackets, and as their identification cards were inside, no one could tell who they were, and they've been buried and no one knows who they are. The only way we will be when the roll is called. We've not half enough doctors in Maritzburg. All wounded are sent here for safety, as they never expected such fearful slaughter. The Boers killed the wounded in the last fight and then stripped them of their clothes. One officer had nothing on him but his shirt when he found, and they'd robbed him of another £50 watch and chain and actually cut his finger off for his ring. We generally go to the station to see the different corps off, waving them farewell and wishing them luck, and take them sandwiches, cake, fruit and cigarettes, etc., and they are so delighted. They strike camp at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it generally takes nearly the whole day for 500 men to entrain their horses and wagons, and sometimes they are faint with hunger and thirst as they are leaving in open cattle trucks in the boiling sun or pelting rain for a 3 or 4 hour journey to the front.